Nice to meet you. Oh, no, well, good, I have you. Yeah. Okay. If, like my section theories are ready batteries as well.
Oh, it's fine on YouTube. I don't, okay.
Okay, maybe I'm battery last but I don't know.
Like, it's fine here.
Oh, okay.
Why? Great.
And so, where's the
Why?
I don't know. And Hammond apparently, so that's great. Yeah. So let's say we should bring anything. I will. I was just figuring if they're going to today, so. Yeah, I won't have about the time to come in. Tom Cho in town, so I'm going out about with him on the afternoon. Yeah. But I can answer it. Yeah. I miss him. Where did you go last summer? I was so good. Oh, yeah, good. Yeah. I was leaving once I went to PEI and then, okay, are we ready? Oh, did you have two microphones? Oh. Yes. It's in my bag. I think I'm gonna send it.
Yeah. And there's one about
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming here. Oh, this is a beautiful crowd. I love to look at this crowd. Oh, so many beautiful faces. So we wish to acknowledge that we do our work on the land of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Mississaugas of New Credit. And we acknowledge the ways that colonialism and genocide impact Indigenous peoples in history and also today. And that we all have a right to combat settler colonial violence and oppression. Some of us, such as myself, are settlers in this land. We have an extra added obligation, but we, okay. I heard like a bedtime alarm. And yes, we have a responsibility to make place for Indigenous voices at events like this. So please keep an eye on our programming. We do that. And we hope that you all take this like very seriously. I'm sure this isn't the first time you've heard a land acknowledgement, but I hope that they don't become rote for you and that you think about land back, that you think about the same murdered women and girls, spirit people, that you think about these issues, that you write your elected representatives, that you follow Indigenous voices on social media if you venture into those waters, that you read Indigenous books, watch Indigenous movies, support Indigenous artists, and that you will make that a value in your life, not just something you listen to before events. This is also a place that acknowledges that Black Lives Matter. We are 2S LGBTQIA positive, and there's no place for homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia. This is the world's oldest LGBTQ bookstore, so that would be kind of silly. Also, we kind of serve really cool. We are we also in our mandate center other underrepresented voices, such as people with disabilities, and people that are older and people that are younger. You can check out our mandate on our website, but this is an anti-oppressive space, and we won't have any oppression happening here. All right, thank you. Today's lineup will include a guest speaker with a brief Q&A and then our 4 readers, followed by group Q&A. So if you are watching this live online, please type your questions into the YouTube chat as they occur to you, because there is a bit of a time delay. So we want to gather up those questions as they come to you. And we will collect them to ask during the Q&A. And now I will hand this over to Jen.
Brockton Writer Series was founded in November 2009, which means we've been active in the Toronto literary scene for well over a decade. Our nimble Brockton volunteers are Ellen Crowley, Nancy K. Clark, Dorian Everton, who we just saw, Faye Dawn, who is over here, and I'm Dana Albert. If you're interested in joining this amazing team, getting some volunteer experience, some hosting experience, tech experience, you can talk to us after meetings, any one of us, and we would love your help. We'd love to hear from you. We are currently recruiting because I moved to Ottawa. We would like to acknowledge the continued support of the Ontario Arts Council. They make this entire series possible and fund the majority of it. And finally, our thank you to everybody audience for being here.
My team doctor first.
We're so glad you're here, and thank you exactly for that. Now on to our next speaker. An experienced nonprofit leader, Kate Edwards has spent her career in service of the arts and creative industries. She spent more than 15 years with the Association of Canadian Publishers, has served on several industry boards, and in January 2024 was appointed CEO of Access Copyright, representing more than 13,000 Canadian publishers, writers, and visual artists. Okay for sound? Yeah. Closer? How's that? Okay. I feel like I'm the warm-up act for some fairly talented people, so I will try to do my best to get through the topic so you can hear the writers who you're probably really here to listen to this evening. But thank you so much for the invitation. Nancy wrote to us earlier this year to see if we would be available to provide a primer and an intro on artificial intelligence for writers. And I'm quite new to Access Copyright. As was mentioned, I only joined in January, but this has been a real focus of my time so far, and I'm happy to be with you this evening. And I'm actually going to hold this because I find myself shuffling, and this will feel more natural. So anyone who has been following developments around AI will know that the 15 minutes that I've been asked to speak for is really not enough time to cover everything, and we'll only scratch the surface, but I'll do my best. I'll also warn everybody that there will probably be more questions than answers in the presentation because this is an evolving space, and how the copyright landscape, the legislative landscape may be changed or not by generative AI is an open question. So some of those concerns include the unauthorized use of works by generative AI platforms to train their models, how authors and publishers will be compensated for use of their works in that training, whether synthetic works created with generative AI tools will be protected by copyright, and how all of this will affect the livelihood and craft of writers across the creative sector. I do want to acknowledge that there are significant ethical concerns around the use of AI and many questions about the implications, for example, authors' moral rights. That's a really important debate, which will be beyond the scope of this evening's presentation, but my goal is to provide an overview of the basics of generative AI and where the legal framework currently stands in Canada. So as I've already said, this is evolving really quickly. I'm also not a lawyer, so that's something to keep in mind. And what we talk about tonight might be very different a month from now. If you do have specific questions about your own writing practice, again, I'm not able to offer legal advice, and the presentation shouldn't be considered as such. But you can always seek the advice of legal counsel if this should arise for you. So, given our tight timing, I've structured the presentation around 5 key questions. So, what is generative AI? Does Gen AI training constitute copyright infringement? How does copyright apply to synthetic works, that is, AI generated works? How is Gen AI currently being regulated in Canada? And what can writers do to mitigate risk when using Gen AI tools in their own writing practice? And I'll share a few brief updates about some advocacy efforts that the industry is undertaking to protect and represent the rights of creators. Very quickly, before we dive in, I'd like to introduce you to Access Copyright. If you don't already know about the organization, we're a national nonprofit copyright collective that has been around for more than 35 years. We represent the reprographic rights, so the print and digital reproduction rights of more than 700 publishers and 13,000 creators. I'd be happy to speak more with anybody about affiliating with the organization if you're interested, or there's lots of information on the website. So diving into the real topic this evening, what is generative AI? In broad strokes, Generative AI is artificial intelligence that is capable of generating text, images, videos, or other data using generative models in response to user prompts. So traditional AI has been around for a very long time, but was built on more limited data sets that allowed for pattern recognition to provide analysis and predictions. And what we've seen in more recently is generative AI or Gen AI that allows for pattern creation. So not just recognizing patterns, but creating new ones, new data and content based on prompts. So moving along, the second question, so does Gen AI training constitute copyright infringement? And this has been in the news a lot. One of the challenges we have is that generative AI models, how they work is quite obscure, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to get information on how the models being used by these systems are actually trained. But we do know that they are being trained on all types of data, including copyrighted materials from Canada. This has been reported on in the media, and well-known, and thousands of books have shown up in some of those data sets from Canadian writers. And to feed those large language models, the platforms are ingesting large amounts of data via text and data mining, which is scraped from the whole breadth of the internet. Online web pages, data sets, and these are fed directly into the model. This is happening across borders, it's happening in Canada. And the big question is, does this use without permission constitute copyright infringement? We haven't seen any court cases in Canada on this question yet, but there are many, more than 20 active cases ongoing in the United States, which everyone is looking at very carefully. One of the big challenges in bringing an infringement claim forward is that we really don't know what is going on in that sort of the black box of the AI development. There's currently not any transparency or very limited transparency about the data being ingested by the systems. So we are seeing rights holder groups around the world making the case that transparency on the part of AI platforms is essential to reduce the information imbalance between large tech companies and the rights holders, the creators who produce the content. Without transparency requirements, it will be really difficult to demonstrate that an AI platform has infringed copyright in the consumption of those works. There is also one of the defenses we've seen in the US is around fair use, and there's a robust users' rights framework both in the US and in Canada. And those defenses have been key in the US court cases about whether the output created by the models is infringing. So in terms of, so we've talked a little bit about the inputs, what's going in, and now in terms of the outputs, what's coming out the other side. There are two main questions that relate to copyright and AI outputs. First, can the output or what is created, the new work, based upon prompts infringe upon a creator's original work that fed the AI platform in the first place? And can copyright exist in a synthetic work? So on the first point, one of the key rights that a creator has is the right to make copies of a work. So infringement occurs if all or a substantial part of a work is reproduced. In machine learning based on the ingestion of copyrighted works, so that is this, or the outputs from those AI platforms based on user prompts, in fact, a reproduction of a substantial part of the work. And that's the big question that we haven't tested yet. But in Canada, in past copyright infringement cases, courts have applied a qualitative rather than a quantitative assessment. So an important or substantial part of the work has to have been reproduced to constitute infringement. There are limits on what copyright protects. Often Gen AI programs will be asked to produce a new text in the style of a certain author, and copyright does not protect things like style. And this is really the question, or one of the questions at the heart of many of the cases that are before the courts in the US. And in the absence of new regulations or law, a plaintiff would need to show that the output itself is infringing so that it contains a substantial part of the original. On the second question about whether a synthetic work or an AI generated work can be copyrighted, that point is fairly settled. Under Canadian copyright law and most other jurisdictions, for copyright to exist, there must be a human author. The only question now is applying that law to the facts of each individual case, depending on where the final material produced by or with generative AI assistance falls on the scale from human author to fully AI generated synthetic work. Copyright in Canada does not require registration, so we haven't seen any tests of this matter that I can point to. But in the US, to obtain copyright, creators must register for copyright with the US Copyright Office, which then adjudicates whether copyright can be established for the work in question. Currently, the US Copyright Office has determined that purely synthetic content from Gen AI programs is not protected by copyright. They have taken the position that when a person makes a prompt, they can't predict exactly what the outcome of that prompt will be, and so that it does not satisfy the human authorship aspect. There is some debate around this question, and we may see this change over time. Copyright may exist in some degree, so this is something to stay tuned to. And moving right along, thank you. So far, the questions have mostly generated more questions, and I foreshadowed in the introduction rather than providing answers. And you might be wondering what role government has to play in clarifying the law around AI. AI regulation is still very much in its infancy in Canada. Last year, the government did release a voluntary code of conduct for AI developers and systems. This code is voluntary, but identifies proposed measures that AI organizations are encouraged to apply to their operations when they are developing and managing general purpose generative AI systems. This code of conduct followed the tabling 2 years ago, almost in June 2022, of a bill C-27, the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act. This law was drafted before the widespread use of ChatGPT, and many commentators have observed that the government is playing catch up with this legislation. Its technology has already surpassed or moved ahead what it was drafted to address. That being said, the bill is intended to create a framework for AI systems, regulating those systems by establishing common requirements across Canada for their design, development, and use, and also would prohibit certain conduct in relation to AI systems that could result in serious harms to individuals or their interests. So that bill is working its way through the legislative process. It can be very lengthy and slow moving, as directors of government will know, and it's unclear when or if that bill will pass into law. For now, the practical part of the presentation, how can writers mitigate risk if you're using Gen AI tools? This is becoming more common, and there are some efficiencies arguably to be gained where use of Gen AI is practical and limited. First, like anything, check the terms of conditions of tools you are using before you start. It's really important to read the fine print and understand what for example, OpenAI, which it's real ChatGPT. Those terms say that they will assign you all the rights, the title, and interest in the output generated by the system from their platform. They don't claim any interest and say it can be used for any purpose, including commercial purposes. But that output might be infringing. It might look like it reproduces content that was not ingested with permission or compensation. So how can the platform guarantee that it can be used safely? Further, assignments of copyright must be in writing and signed, so terms that you accept via web form or page are likely to constitute the true assignment at law. And again, this hasn't been tested in court. Meta's terms, on the other hand, allow users to retain ownership to the prompts they use, but don't grant an assignment of the outputs. So it's debatable whether that output could ever be claimed to be fully yours. So this is not legal advice or even a definitive answer, but just questions to consider if you are using programs offered by the large AI systems. And just remember, you have we're humans, and humans must contribute significantly in order for copyright protection to be afforded to the work. If to have a better claim for copyright protection, you want to be further on the human generated side of the spectrum that we had up on the screen earlier rather than the AI generated. And copyright is more likely to exist when it is human generated content. Finally, if you ever do need to prove copyright down the line, it is essential that you've documented the instances where you have used, and perhaps even more importantly, where you have not used AI tools to create your work. That may become important if you ever face an infringement claim in respect of your work, or if somebody else is using your work. So finally, I'll just briefly touch on what Access Copyright's position is on all of this. We are working closely with colleagues from across the entire Canadian writing and publishing industry, English and French, to advocate for regulations to protect the copyrights of creators and allow a marketplace for the licensing of content to support AI development. In short, I'm happy to talk more about the recommendations that we put forward, but it does boil down to how I remember it, 3 C's. When content is used for AI development, the creator should be asked for consent, they should be credited, and they should have the opportunity to be compensated for that use. So that's a whirlwind introduction, but I'm happy to attempt.
I was ready to do this, yeah. Okay. I was
Does anybody want it? Okay. Someone had a question or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have, you mentioned in the bill, the federal government that there is a code of conduct standard. Is that national or are you collaborating internationally on standards?
That's a great question. So the code of conduct that has been introduced, that's an initiative of the Federal Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Again, it's voluntary, it applies. It's intended to apply within Canada, but this is very much a global issue. So governments are collaborating across borders, certainly all the rights holder organizations. We're working with colleagues around the world and tracking developments. And I didn't get into it, but there have been recent developments in Europe with a new framework. So there's, given the borderless nature of development, I mean, my personal view is it's a global challenges, global opportunities, and that behooves cooperation and partnership.
Thank you.
I have a question. I work at a publishing house, and I work with a lot of unpublished manuscripts and also with great material at the publishing house. Do you have any tips for us as to how we can avoid these things being fed into these algorithms? I don't.
Like no ebooks.
It's a really good question. And a publisher asked another session that a colleague of mine was presenting at last week, said, like, part of our promotional strategy has been to have excerpts of text,
Yeah.
like online and images, and we're just feeding the machine. And I mean that information is being scraped, has been scraped. So you know, it's a business decision whether those promotional opportunities outweigh the risks. But I think right now, just the lack of transparency, it's quite challenging. So efforts around regulation and being prepared to offer licensing solutions where they may exist, that's a possibility.
Here, that's copyright.
I'm just wondering, for audiobooks, do you know if the audiobooks are being used to be fed into these algorithms? I'm not an expert, but I would guess yes. I have read that even, things like YouTube, audio that's posted online, the tools are able to scrape that voice to text and also, for voice notes too, right? Like you can create AI audio and videos. So
Yeah.
If it's available on the internet, I would hazard to guess that it is being used for training or has been.
I wonder, in your personal history, what is kind of like the more, I won't say disturbing, but what are the some kind of more damning situations you've seen of people's products and people's, like likeness being used in AI situations? Like, what is the more, I'll say scandalous situations you've, heard of that you can talk about?
Yeah, it's probably beyond the scope of this talk, but I mean, there are some pretty disturbing and frankly abusive types of likenesses and videos that have been AI generated that there are accounts in the news that I would want people to. In terms of text, the books 3 corpus, which there was a pretty significant CBC investigation around. There's lots of documentation online that they've listed of really like thousands of Canadian books, full texts that have been ingested. So that's not around likeness, but full works that have been ingested and used for training that were not authorized, no consent was given.
And you said there was a CBC documentary done on it.
Yeah, there was a news story. It was, I think it was published in December of 2023. If you search CBC News for books 3 corpus or AI, the Writers Union was involved in that story as well. So there's, and a video piece on that is available.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So anything that's like behind a firewall, they can't get at unless they buy it. You know, like to scrape is that correct?
I think do firewalls work?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge of. Yeah, and I mean, even, I think, again, books, like there are lots of like piracy, like you can find full, whether it was originally firewalled or behind a paywall or whatever, there's lots of, I don't want to promote any of those sites for people to go searching for, but there's lots of unauthorized content circulating. Not warming up for the writers to come, but.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is anybody else here? They're anxiety, just like from here to like here. Yeah. The good news is if anybody is writing like a dystopia, there you go. You got some content, right? Yeah. All right. Okay. Myself a minute there. Now that we're reaching the world via our very own YouTube channel. Okay, it's okay. Yeah, we're casting on YouTube. I mean, we did in spirit of full transparency, we got extra money to pay our authors more for being online because we realized that there was more risk and more associated with that. I
So that's the topic. Now that we're on YouTube, we need your help to make it official and grow our reach. So, please smash that like and subscribe button. If you're on YouTube right now, you can do it right now. If you're here right now, you can take out your phone for a minute and do it, or you can do it when you're home. But please, if you, find us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It really helps our reach to get out there and bring more people in here. You could also donate to us. Our website has like a button for a PayPal. We often hand around a picture, but these days less and less people actually have. I don't know if anybody has.
Does it just
We can bring out a picture anyway. But there is a PayPal button and we really appreciate it if you would donate to us. We pay our authors. We feel it's really important to pay our authors well, to pay our guest speakers and to pay all of the artists who do work for us. And for that, we do get Ontario Arts Council funding, but there's other things. We also need that, right? There's this tech that we have now to be able to be on YouTube. And you occasionally have to extra line. It all costs money, so and all of your support is really appreciated. And now for the readers. As a reminder, for those of you watching at home, please type your questions into the chat as they occur to you. First up, we've got Kevin Crowley. Hi, Kevin's family of Brockton. We're very happy to have him here. He's a Canadian journalist, editor, and author. He's written for newspapers, magazines, and radio. His work has won a number of awards, including a Missioner Award for Public Service Journalism and a Journalist of the Year Award Journalist of the Year honors at the Ontario Newspaper Awards. Sir Middling You is his first novel. Woo! Give it up for Kevin.
Right, how does that sound? In closer, further back? Oh, it's gonna work here. Is that okay? Yeah. How's that? You can hear me? All right. Nobody said anything about risk, Dorianne. Risk on the YouTube, is that what you're saying? So, yeah, thanks for having me. This is a really wonderful opportunity for me, and it's amazing to be in the iconic and historic Glad Day Bookshop. I went to university many years ago, just a few blocks away over at the University of Toronto, and had lots of friends bring me over here. Yeah, so I just remember it from the time. My daughter that Dorianne was referring to is a member of the Brockton Writers Series, and she's down in. She wanted to be here tonight because she got me the gig. She is down in New York City with a friend. She's in Central Park right now, enjoying an opera. But she had sent me pictures of the Stillman in Memorial. She was there as well today. So I just thought that was, she's there, and I'm here at Glad Day where so many things happened so many years ago. Anyhow, I'm here to talk about Sir Middling You. It's a comedy and a satire with a lot of absurd characters. It's about a small sort of third-tier liberal arts university. It's about all the quirks and minefields of university politics. It's a campus novel, that's the genre. And most campus novels are told from a faculty point of view. I thought, having spent 13 years as a director of communications and reputation management guy, I thought I wanted to write the story from the point of view of a staff member. You may not know, but at university, typically, about the number of staff, support staff, outnumber the number of full-time faculty members by about 2 to 1. And the university is like a small, crazy city. It's you've got professors and scholars and researchers and students, but you've also got electricians and maintenance people and accountants and PR people and all sorts of folks. And my time in the university PR world, I loved it. Similar to my time in journalism, in newsrooms, full of incredibly bright people, incredibly quirky people as well, and weird things would go on that you would never expect from smart people. Or maybe I was just not even, maybe that's what smart people. The fictional story is
based on a fictional university, which is named after a fictional character named Sir Richard Middleton. So we're gonna hear a little bit about him. He's a controversial figure in the book. There's a very controversial statue to him because he became a politician. He was the fictional character was very supportive of Indigenous residential schools. He got very rich selling bullets and bombs to the government during the First World War, and he went on to do a number of other oppressive things. And they rewarded him with a knighthood and with a university in Backing. So I'm going to read the first part. I'm going to read introduces us to two of the main characters. The main character is a fellow named James Duffy, who's the director of communications. He was a very passionate social justice advocate during his student days. But after a few years in PR, he's lost touch with his values and he's a bit world weary and he's pretty much just a functionary now of the administration. However, his best friend, Dr. Fifi Dubé, is trying to help him find his moral compass. She's a brilliant young scholar. She studies the political economy of climate change, and she's a very passionate advocate for social justice. So one of the arcs going through the story is these two friends and Fifi trying to help Duffy get back in touch with his values and his moral compass. I'm just trying to think, so there is a statue controversy. It's about the university dealing with a bunch of contemporary issues like controversial statues, freedom of expression and free speech on campuses, guest speakers, controversial guest speakers, who's allowed to speak on the university campus. It is a sort of an absurd tale full of absurd characters. Hopefully you'll find it funny, but if you read through the whole book, what I'm trying to do is I've tried to use some humor and actually put a spotlight on some really important issues. So although it may sound a little bit silly and absurd, somebody on Amazon described it as a silly book. And I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. But it is to some degree. I did want to amuse people, but I also wanted to touch on some issues that I had the opportunity and the privilege to work with during my time at a university, working with Indigenous groups, working on PEI communities, and trying to breathe life into policy and all the good words. I won't go on about land acknowledgements, but I have some thoughts on land acknowledgements, having worked with Indigenous students and faculty members. All right, without further ado, I'm going to jump in with a reading. And I will try and never keep to my limit. The first reading, I wanted to, it introduces us to Fifi Dubé, who is the bright young scholar who is fighting to get rid of this statue of Sir Richard Middleton and a few other things to keep a very controversial right-wing speaker off campus. And she's talking with, and it introduces her and her relationship with James Duffy. Dr. Fifi Dubé was a bright young scholar who studied the political economy of climate change. While earning degrees from McGill, Harvard, and the London School of Economics, she had published numerous articles and a well-received book, all before her 27th birthday. She was collegial, hardworking, and brilliant, a winning combination that deeply annoyed her faculty colleagues. The only reason Fifi was working at Sir Middleton U was to be close to her ailing mother. Iris Dubé had struggled with asthma her entire life. Now in her early 60s, she was additionally burdened with congestive heart failure. Her declining health, coupled with the recent death of her husband, had prompted Iris to return to Youngbury, home of her youth. Iris's dearly departed spouse, Fifi's stepfather, had been a petroleum consultant named Frank Dubé. He and Iris had lived their lives moving from one oil-rich country to the next so that Frank could help kings and dictators turn fossil fuel into gold. Owing to her parents' constant travels, Fifi had done most of her growing up in boarding school. It was the perfect training ground, she later said, for learning to navigate the arcane rules, petty jealousies, and spiteful politics of academic life. Taking the job at Sir Middleton U was a major detour for Fifi's expected career path. No one had been more confounded by the choice than her advisor at the London School of Economics. "Are you bloody mad?" the eminent scholar had exclaimed. "I only mentor one postdoc at a time. You going off to surf back and beyond makes me look like a damn poor judge of horseflesh. Fifi was undeterred. Her decision to move back to Canada and seek academic work at Sir Midland U was part of a crise de conscience that had flared up following the sudden death of her stepfather. The Dark Lord, as Fifi called Frank today, had slipped on a puddle of motor oil in an otherwise immaculate street in Kuwait City, striking his head and passing away 2 days later. Fifi realized that if she didn't make up for lost time with her mother, it would soon be too late. She joined Sir Midland U on a postdoctoral fellowship. Over the next 12 months, she applied for several tenure-track positions, but was turned down for each. As a consolation, one of the hiring panel upgraded her contract to a limited-term faculty appointment, which the chair said, with a great show of benevolence, would add some beef to Fifi's CV. Fifi had gone straight to her office and punched a hole in the wall. I love my mother, she later told Duffy, but I wish Iris would either get better or kick the bucket so I can get the hell out of this two-bit press school. Fifi and Duffy had first encountered one another during the meeting of Sir Midland's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Duffy had asked a question, far too politely, in Fifi's opinion, about why the university had no plan to implement the education-related recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Indigenous Residential Schools. Mr. Duffy is calling bullshit on this committee, Fifi had declared, and I agree. When it comes to social justice, Sir Midland U flits from one crisis to another without making good on any of its commitments. Duffy had been mortified. His motivation had been far less altruistic than Fifi seemed to think. He had simply seen Sir Midland's lack of action on truth and reconciliation as a missed opportunity for some good PR. But given the ferocity of Fifi's support, he had decided that this was not the time to set the record straight. Over the next few months, he and Fifi crossed paths several times at Sir Dickey's, the campus grad club. Before long, they were meeting for coffee at least once a week. Duffy assumed that Fifi was a nickname, since the diplomas that hung on her office wall certified that F.I. Dubé had been awarded a Bachelor of Arts, a Master of Arts, and a Doctor of Philosophy, each summa cum laude. So, Duffy said one day, does Fifi come from your initial? Nope. A nickname? Sort of. Something cute that your dad used to call you? My stepfather wasn't a nickname kind of guy. Okay, I give up. Fifi put down the book she was reading and looked Duffy square in the eye. It's my burlesque name. I perform in an all-woman troupe called the Fabulous Ladies. You should come to one of our shows. Duffy's pale cheeks flushed as red as a cathouse garden. He nodded thoughtfully, hoping to appear more sophisticated than he was. You know, I've never actually been to a burlesque show, he said. All the more reason to come to one of our gigs, replied Fifi. It'll make you laugh and give you a boner. The perfect night out. Duffy's mouth dropped. Shock? Asked Fifi. A little, admitted Duffy. You're pulling my leg, right? Nope, I really am part of a burlesque troupe. We dance, tell naughty jokes, and get pretty darn naked. Most people find it funny and arousing. Duffy scoured his brain for a witty reply, but his Catholic upbringing sprang into action like an involuntary missile. Racy repartee was beyond his reach. He tried to smile, but his lips seemed to work on just one side, producing a look of virginal embarrassment. Fifi was delighted. You were in a cover band, she teased. Didn't you do the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing? Duffy let out a nervous chuckle. We smoked a little weed, but the sex was mostly wishful thinking. Geez, I would never have guessed. More seriously, she added, just to be clear, I'm not coming on to you. I prefer women, at least in bed. It took a moment for Duffy to digest that remark. If he were more quick-witted, he might have replied, I prefer women both in bed and out. But he was not that droll, and not that worldly. He just sat there, eyes blank and mouth open. Fifi's words would prowl through his conflicted mind for a very long time. It wasn't that he was shocked by her sexual preference. It was the frank mention of sex itself, and Fifi's evident comfort with it. Nearly 3 years on, Duffy had still not summoned the courage to see Fifi perform with her burlesque troupe. And despite his lively imagination, he was in no hurry to do so. He enjoyed Fifi's company, and he didn't want any of his personal hang-ups to spoil their friendship. So that's the friendship, and that's sort of the basis. We have time to another short piece. What's the time?
2 minutes?
Okay, I'll try to get through part of it. I just want to give a sense of how the story progresses. So this is, James is getting himself into hot water, as he gets sucked into, having to make a decision about where his moral compass lies. So he's talking about, how a very conservative prof on campus is starting to sue Duffy because a student told the prof that Duffy called him a racist, which Duffy did not do. Lumley wants to sue me, and he's complaining directly to Blunt, Duffy's boss. He's trying to turn this into an academic freedom thing. First of all, it's a freedom of speech thing, said Fifi, not an academic thing. And second, grow a pair, will you? You should be wearing this like a badge of honor. You're standing up to racism. You're a role model for allyism. When the dust settles, you'll have your self-respect and the respect of others. Man up, Duffy, and embrace the opportunity. But I didn't call Lily Do or Dulap a racist. You may have implied it, but even if you didn't, you should have. Stay strong, my friend, and remember, never explain, never retract, and never apologize. Let me guess, Prime Minister Mackenzie King. No, you moron. Nellie McClung, the pioneering Canadian feminist. Right, of course. Get the thing done and let them howl. Exactly. So how did Morris still make out with President Merriweather and the Vice President Blunt? You haven't heard? Heard what? Come on, Duffy, you work for Blunt, and Merriweather is always confiding in you. The first part of that statement is true, but meaningless. The second part is not as true as you think. Well, Morris said he hasn't heard back from Merriweather or Blunt. Really? When did he call them? 4 days ago. That's not good, said Duffy. Listen, Blunt is probably going to haul me to a meeting today. If I still have my job, I'll push him hard to meet with you, Morris, and Tessa. Those are other social activists on campus. You really think Dr. Cody is the backbone to do the right thing, asked Fifi? I'm not sure what the right thing in this case is. You've got to admit, it's a bit of a tightrope for administration. Oh, geez, you're sounding like a bureaucrat again. Listen, Pete, it's easy to think these things are clear cut when you're not responsible for managing the whole university. Hey, I get complexity, remember? And I'm not talking about canceling the lecture. I support freedom of speech, but I don't see how that prevents the president and his VP of Diddly Squad from supporting a scholarly discussion about how we memorialize historic figures. Merriweather and Blunt see it differently. That's horseshit, said Fifi. This is the perfect time to show the government what Sir Midland News stands for and why it shouldn't be assimilated into the board. The board, you know, the evil homogenous collective in Star Trek. The next generation, right? Yeah, good analogy. I think it's actually a metaphor. They were both silent for a moment. Listen, Duffy, I've got to say this straight out. I think you're letting this assistant vice president thing, Duffy's trying to get a promotion, thing mess up your judgment. No promotion is worth sacrificing your principles. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm just trying to find a middle way. Now you're back to sounding like a wishy-washy weasel. That's kind of insulting, said Duffy. That's what friends are for, said Fifi.
Thank you so much. Here to introduce our next reader, AJ Bowman. She has authored Crazy Mad from Gordon Hill Press 2014, Lost Enough, a collection of short stories, and 3 poetry chapbooks, and co-edited Motherhood in Precarious Times. Bowman's writing has also appeared in numerous magazines and anthologies. A by-hand rights advocate, they live on unceded and Anishinaabe Algonquin territory.
Okay, so my strategy towards AI is to try to depress it as much as possible. Eventually it'll give up. Thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. Inhibition. She breaks the glass. Just like that, a new night. Oh, where to begin now? So, the majority of the poems in Crazy Mad are, based on, my experiences of mental illness and, gender and sexual orientation nonconformity, but specifically fears about how a person is perceived by others. Nonconformism. It's not a secret that this doesn't end well, or doesn't end at all until everything does. Even the Orioles and the salamanders and the making of rice cakes and cobwebs and love, or that half of us are starved, the other half fed for the slaughter and distraction. I mean, that work has never freed anyone, but keeps cranking out blueprints and laws to fill prisons with cheap labor, by which I mean disposable plastic corn chips. That a depressed, invisible queer falling out of time makes hardly any noise, but cacophony compared to the gut claw whimpers of the even further down. Sign languages in the dark. Hush the guards on. That survival and surviving are two distinct goals rooted in separate grammars of agency. Duct tape, sewing thread, razor wire. But the enemy of my enemy probably doesn't look uppity bitches either. We could go on and on like this, so let's leave it here. So I've been listening to Song of Achilles on audiobook as it's being scraped. To my shocking horror, I realized that I've been saying one of the characters in my poem's name wrong the entire time. So, female rage, Clytemnestra, avenged by Furies, swerving in a loop of hate, wrath like wars, sows her steel where the thread's been torn. Death by metaphors, deafing masses of children, stopping up a rampant wound that's yielded crops of babies, a bushel culled, seasons sown under fertile dirt, a mantle weighing down forever's seeds. Needle closes another sleeve, the neck stems the exits, the final stitch breaks red. She welcomes her king Agamemnon, owner of good press but no foresight, in a crew, calling him coarse linen, a torrent of savage swears before the fall. Allies arrive too late, the damages irreversible. Husband, know thine enemy has been loosed like the swing of an axe. I'm just getting another quote, so my apologies for the symbols. Egomania. My voice is my own. How it slides across the harbor like a shark fin, like echoes in the cavern of this empty wine glass searching, a swirl of sonar signaling, nope, nope, nope. My voice is a record of time, sounds the way my mother's did when she was my age, though hers was smokier, accented by war, rage, more childbirth, a torn canal before cells multiplied to choke her from inside. My voice makes my sisters uncomfortable. My voice spills a transatlantic swim, launching long-range missiles of k and sp into the guttural. Doesn't speak one word of Algonquin, though I squat on Anishinaabe clay, staggering sea of nearby bogs, bouncing back in indigenous silence of dead feathers, perpetual saplings. My voice is locked out of the meeting, muffled and released by cock and by pussy, rolls its R's and its O's, trembles with the wire hum of gendered fragilities, will never ever break. They told you, don't you want to up on AI already? Gynephilia. For me to track where sunlight descends, dapples through cottonwoods, or the damp weight of forest air lifted by ocean zephyr, contemplate Copperthorne's letters, die inside Baldwin's lines, float away to Davis over Parker. I was never. Such embarrassments of egoism, tropical hillsides round the equator whisper what I am not worth, before I can dream of buying myself the expensive taste of bittersweet chilies. Yet she stands at my door, has hand-ribboned a small box of Mexican lightning for me. Cocoa so electric, her name stills in my mouth as it burns. I'm thinking a lot about my sister today, and this poem is for her. Oppositional defiance. Fingers green and bloody post pruning weeds from forks at our mother's grave. Else and I stopped by the quilting shop to get grommets for my son's mass. Swatches of little league boys and dancing witches watching us at the counter. Rayon schooled round 1,000 volts, hushing conversation. The seamstress who ambulanced our father following him to hospital last week says they don't make men like that anymore. I picked out a golden seam river, folded in on itself like opera glasses, catch my sister's eyes. We should be so fucking lucky. Maybe about somebody did something funny right before me. Self-harm. For the young clerk at the Pincher Creek 7-Eleven. Black line art. We share details of our tattoos as I paid for late night coffee, forearmed with poetry. My hummingbird called alphabet. And you wear your dead brother's eagle. I don't mean to be creeping, but I could hear you shit talk Paleolithic racist cowboys all night as you restock this town's slush puppy engines with cherry red dye and whatever flavor blue is meant to be. Count out stoners as crumpled cash for candy bars and porn, mop up 1 a.m. vomit. Talisman, chronicle, warning, lie. We can make anything seem simple if we reduce it enough. The scars slicing your arms, blood encrusted on the pit bed, ground fires racing beneath topsoil. Every new reason I return to this damn place like it's home. So the poems in this book are centered around a series of poems based on photos by the American photographer John Crispin, who took photos of the suitcases and other luggage found at the Willard Asylum in upstate New York. And it was taken from the inmates when they checked in and was never returned to them. Photo number 2, the suitcase of Anna B. After John Crispin's photographs of the abandoned suitcases in the Asylum for chronic insane. Out in the garden, stars roar. Oh, sorry. Back stitch, satin stitch, military parade of silk, split stitches across linen, flashes of purple, petals white, stamens sewn in darkest blue. Out in the garden, stars roar, splash down vodka, beat mad as hammers at black earth writhing, carrion beetles, worms. Behind glass, everything keeps pressed to win. Stitches march AB, ABCB, CD, never CB, AB. Stitches run perfectly, snake across cotton and draw up from, snake into. Nothing has proved to be like this. I'm just gonna do two more poems. Obsessive traits. Sweater frayed, edges crumbled to the floor, moth-eaten. Small pool of black mint following. Not poor, just sentimental. How she wore it, naked beneath, when I came home the day after. Years and lovers later, I still wore it at times. For the cached memory of her scent, long gone, even in the years when I'd forgotten her last name, where she'd moved on to. I'm gonna finish with a longer poem called Illusions of Grandeur. Canada, there's no one left who isn't here already. We slogged to your shores by dinosaur muck left in boatload to steal your thunder, and we have. Canada, there's no boom in your swing anymore, just a steady nasal drip. Canada, my people came from lowlands and were sick of drowning in your mists. Canada, your profile said you were taller than this. Canada, stop sitting there taking it. Stand up for yourself, you patsy. No one cares about your existential angst. Canada, we are not amused. Canada, I don't mean to worry you, but have you always had that rule there? Canada, stop your bloody whining. America never loved you, and you're better off without her. Everybody knows she was only doing you because you were next door and you have no self-esteem. Canada, big business says your railroad can't get it up anymore. Canada, we both know how long it's been since your last fight. Canada, it's fucking cold up here and the snow's not melting fast enough. What do a few more dead seals matter? You killed thousands of them with your dragnets and firearms. You're just complaining because it's not as much fun this way. Poor Canada, my buffalo are all gone. Boo-hoo. Canada, I don't know if you've noticed, but you're run by a minority. Canada, if we still had an ice floe. Canada, I'm so grateful I present as a white woman so I can just be medicated instead of missing. Canada, I don't believe you anymore. My parents came here with $20 in 1960, but it cost more than that to bury them below the permafrost. Canada, they never went on welfare. So how about we make a deal, eh? Canada, your food banks are stocked with cheesies and broken promises. I think we forgot to pay the hydro bill. Canada, you're kind of cute when you get angry. Canada, I've heard that you go both ways too. Don't pretend you've never done this before. Canada, you're doing all right for your age, except for the fur in your ears and the wheezing. Canada, you should always carry protection. Don't think it can't happen to you. Canada, you're not too big to fail. Canada, watch out for the junkies. They're the only ones who understand you. Canada, I stole the idea for this poem from a dead American. Canada, I'm not sorry the way you want me to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was gonna make some sort of a joke about like funny satire followed by sad poems, but then they picked it up at the end. That was funny. Funny. I mean, it's not funny, but funny. Yeah. There were themes going on in both of those, right? You tie in the like creeping anxiety of the opening, and we got a nice real variety here, folks. That's what I love. I love variety. I'll say this more at the end, but I do want to just kind of interject that there are books for sale by both Kevin and AJ, and our next author has one book for sale. But you're gonna want to buy it after you hear her. So Sophia Mosageti is an Iranian and French Canadian writer based out of Toronto. She likes to write about places, spaces, and the identities that mark them and are marked by them. Desperado is her debut novel. Can everybody hear me?
Somebody, it's not tall.
Okay, hello? All right, everybody can hear me.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and to Brockton being here in the rain. And everybody, I'm going to be reading from my debut novel, Desperada. I'm going to be reading actually kind of far into it today. I'm not going to say too much about it. All you need to really know is that the main character is a young woman who, as the novel's beginning, has just lost her little sister, and she feels responsible for that death. And then through the grieving process, or her desire not to grieve, she sets out to travel and ends up traveling to 6 different cities. And here she's in Istanbul specifically. And she's there to, her sister is there. She hasn't seen her family in a long time. And she's also made a friend. At 7:15, the English teacher pulled into the hotel driveway wearing a forest green button-down shirt. He smelled of strong soap overlaid by cologne. I slipped into the passenger seat, and that thin, playful smile of his appeared again. Where's your sister? The truth was that I hadn't invited her because I hadn't seen her yet today, despite her promise. She has a migraine, I said. Of course. You don't believe that I have a sister? Inshallah, I believe everything you say, he said. We set off, merging onto the nearby highway. I slid my leopard print coat off my bare shoulders and waited in this silence for his touch or gaze. Can you jump in such clothes? He finally asked. He met my miniskirt and my sparkling purple heels from Paris. I touched his arm. Don't be sexist. He asked if it was sexist to not want me to break my neck at tonight's celebration. I've done all kinds of things in these heels, I said. He turned up the radio. Don't you want to know what they were? He changed the channel from speaking voices to a woman trilling over a synth pop. Look there, he said. He pointed to shadows running in the field outside my window, packs of wild dogs. It was possible that I was being abducted, that I would lie dead in some forest come morning. I was briefly afraid, but only in the abstract. There was something poetic about the possibility of dying on the anniversary of my little sister's death. How do you know they're not wolves? I asked. Because I know. By the time we turned off the highway onto a dark, narrowing road, we'd driven for over an hour. Our car followed a long line of others headed toward the scent of smoke. Finally, we reached a large clearing already packed with cars. Beyond them, bonfires blazed. I touched the English teacher's leg. He cut the engine. Listen, he said, I am not going to sleep with you tonight. He got out of the car. I wasn't. I stammered as I climbed out after him, even though I had been, and I was. The Chaharsha Mesuri crowd was larger than I had ever seen come out for the celebration in Toronto. Behind us, more cars were pulling in, cutting their engines, mostly Persians, but also others who celebrated Nowruz. Some Turks and Azeris and Kurds. Young boys jumped wildly over huge flames, screaming with glee. From several of the fires, that familiar chant could be heard. Saudi Liman as to Sorfi to Azman. My yellow is yours, the red is mine. All that was bad, thick, and yellow would be cast into the fire to be replaced with warmth, energy, and life. Are you hungry? Asked the English teacher. As he laid his hand on the small of my back, I figured this was a game we were playing. He led me to where the kebabs and tomatoes were being grilled on charcoal barbecues. And honestly, to kebab kuide and pita sandwich. The meat was so good. Its juices dripped down my chin. And as the English teacher handed me a napkin, I thought about how I was going to kiss him later. Then I asked him about his wife. She is the most hardworking person I know. Is she beautiful? the most beautiful woman in the world. Children ran around us like they belonged only to the wind. Why did you bring me here? Lit only by the fires, the angular lines of a space were drenched in shadow. That isn't what you want to know, he said. You want to know if I am happy, if my wife makes me happy. Isn't that what you want to know? The fires crackled, voices swelled. So this really was a game to him. He hadn't meant what he'd said in the car. I felt I was an ember now, glowing. Well, does she make you happy? It is hard at times, of course, but I am a happier man married than unmarried. I wanted to hold his hand. I wanted to lie in the dirt with him, tangle my legs with his while he brought me to that little death. Because she is the most beautiful woman in the world. Because together we are stronger. She is mine and I am hers. That sounds horrible to belong to somebody like that. You do not understand, he said. And I hope I never do. I pulled off one shoe, then the other. I started to run. Someone called out to me in Farsi, something that I did not understand, for me to watch out probably, but I didn't care. As I leapt, I felt another person leaping with me, and I was terrified we would collide. Zardiman asto sorkieto asman. I screamed as hard as I could. When I landed, though, there was only me. The English teacher was waiting, aggravatingly serene. Don't you want to jump too? I asked. And then he did. Afterwards, we sat on the grass, feeling energized and a little winded. I'm never going to get married, I told him. But you will be missing out. On what? I pulled back my hair, exposing my neck. I arched my back a little too. You do not understand life, he said. Of course I do. We are born and then we die. And I knew something inside me beckoned to him, and that in the morning he would hate himself like a devil. We ended up in a tiny coffee shop near Istiklal Avenue. On a shelf behind the counter were cages holding yellow birds that incessantly tweeted a high-pitched sound that reminded me of coming out of a Berlin club at sunrise. But I did not mention this to the English teacher, who had pulled my chair up for me when I sat. We were the only patrons. Our server was 14 or 15 at the most, sweet-looking, with a chubby face and narrow brown eyes. He set the cups of strong coffee down in front of each of us, then returned behind the counter to scroll through his phone. The English teacher pointed to his coffee. In Greece, they say this is Greek coffee. In Turkey, they say this is Turkish coffee, but like a good Persian, I believe everything originates in Iran. He erupted into big belly laughter. You see the world as one big joke, I said. I was annoyed that he brought me here when I asked for alcohol, and I was annoyed that on the ride here, when I put my hand on his leg, he'd simply moved it back onto my lap. It is a joke, he said. It isn't. The coffee was thick and bitter. After my first sip, my heart started to race. Why did you take me to the celebration? I said. I thought jumping over the fire might cleanse you. Cleanse me of what? Only you know that. Because you think I'm some kind of slut or something? Is that why? The server lifted his eyes from his phone. The English teacher crossed his arms over his chest, vibrating with anxiety or amusement. I couldn't tell which. I did not say that. Because you're married, because you think that's the only way to live, the best way? Well, I just came from staying with artists in Berlin who didn't believe in monogamy or private ownership of any kind. They shared everything. People are not objects. That's not what I mean. I'm saying that you have one view of the world that I'm cleansing, that sex is dirty, blah, blah, blah. Fine. I have a different view. I brought the hot coffee to my lips, blew and took a sip. What is your view? Behind him, the little yellow birds chirped. You must be at least a little curious, or you wouldn't have taken me out tonight while your wife was out of town. His eyes had taken on a bright, careful sheen. The servo rattled the cages, trying to shush the birds, but the chirping crescendo. I don't know what I think anymore, I said. I've left a body count all through Europe, and when I look back on all those men, I feel comforted, not ashamed. The English teacher frowned. I am always faithful to my wife, he said. He hadn't heard a single word I said. So what, you want a medal? You are too young to be so cynical. I'm not cynical, I'm a realist. He had a face like a joke and a face like a mirror, and the more I looked at him, the more the world began to spin. He laughed, and I asked, what's so funny? You want to fight with me? But you just met me. He held my gaze. Come, tell me, why are you so angry all the time? I rubbed my eyes, saw a brief flash of the ocean. I opened them again to the canary yellow birds in their cages. You sure they don't serve alcohol here? I asked. He shook his head. I am married. This is what makes you angry. Don't you miss your freedom? Perhaps you confuse whims with freedom. You think you're so wise. He picked up his cup and put it down. The server banged again on the cages. I am not so wise. I am saying you do not understand life. We are all going to die, you said. Yes, that is the reality. Everything we do in this life is to prepare for death. Imagine yourself on your dying bed. Close your eyes and imagine. Then tell me, what do you see? How do you want to die? That is how you must live your life. All I understood of life was this. That one night, my sister had walked into the ocean. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Spencer Gordon. He's the author of 3 books, a collection of dramatic monologues, A Horse at the Window from Husband Nancy, June 2024. The poetry collection, Cruise in Missile Liberal from Nightwood Edition in 2017, and short story collection, Cosmo from Coach House in 2012. Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you. You're better. Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Okay, honestly. And thanks for everybody I've read with tonight. Yeah, I'm here because this book is like almost born. They're born in June. So June 27th is the launch from Husband Nancy. So I have copies if anybody's interested. I'm hand selling. What is this book? It's a collection of, it says dramatic monologues. I actually conceived of it as a bunch of prose poems. So like blocks of text. To me, they were poetry when I was writing, like mostly during the pandemic. What the F is this book? And then I submitted it eventually, and they said, you know, poetry is really cool right now. How do you feel about it being fiction? And I said, I have no qualms with it. You can call it fiction, or you can call it shit, or whatever you want. Anyway, another thing that's really important to me about this book, and then I'll read a couple pieces. As with my last book, this book trying to partner with an organization here in Toronto. So for this one, it's Fred Victor. It's a social services charity helping people experiencing homelessness. So all the royalties for this book, should they exist, will go to Fred Victor, and they'll be there at the launch as well, the fundraiser, if you're interested. So that's that. I'll read 2 things, and one will be more on the poetry end of the spectrum, I suppose. I conceived of it as a kind of reverential excavation of something that's very precious in the chants and liturgy line. It's called the Sendokai, and it was written in the 8th centuries. But mine is called Sendokai non-binary. No matter on TikTok or Twitch, a great mind, say a sage, say an Adderall brain, conveys itself like an embedded system. Universal Wi-Fi for the Internet of Things. It enfolds the musks and dorsins, the wireframes for Discord, as close as the breath in the mouth, the word Abba sung in Aramaic by Christ. The kingdom of heaven, the other shore, Baidu Incorporated, nothing to win or work to live. And though we follow simps and cucks, NPCs, Susans, normies, and yes, hot girls, doomers, and the woke, Such intimacy gives zero fucks about a god or a daddy, 5G networks or dial-ups made of smoke. The subtle source is clear and bright. Free Getty images of the Earth at night showcase streams of light clustered to places where we grimace in darkness. In the last watch of the evening, the sun remains as furious, burning for the next 5 billion years in Portland. Born, just respawned, and already a room of things arrayed for me. Wayfair crib, Walmart mobiles, Amazon nappies, and plush facsimiles of extinction-bound cetacean from the WWF, which I clutch in terror. Later, the cataract. I learned to be a wonk, then a monk, wadding it all together, but this only compounded my problem. How I discriminate, following some, not others, thinking Ivy League or HVAC, being strict about being non-binary, being OCD about oblivion. How I learned to write a bio, rattling off my POV. Without you, there is no social network, and yet the social network scrolls on without compassion in your way. Deeper, the realization that all laws are power, arbitrary, and yet the need for laws arises even as we defund the police. Deeper, oh gamer girl, the experience of seeing and the Oculus lens are different and none other than the same. Codependent, independent, emotional labor. Yes, honey, when it's 4 o'clock and time for one's dick to be flattened by one's track girl semblance. There was a definite UX, but there's also no UX at all. You can no longer connect to the server, and even the Wayback Machine turns up void. What happened is now past, and the past does not exist, so it never happened. Nothing happens, full stop. And yet our memories of dialogue are conveyed intimately like the great mind of India. The aesthetic lurks in every user. Everyone's a critic. Everyone has a Spotify top 10, and people have style, religious convictions. I enjoy novels that win the Guild. The K-pop, the drone screams, the 8-lane highway, a hierarchy. Falling asleep, sounds become doom jazz ambient. When awake, voices determine happiness in class. There's little to determine Mariah Carey's lyrics from yours, but oh, what a difference an octave makes at Christmas. Eyes closed in the realm of state parts, ears plugged, and all we hear is ocean. Mouth shuts and wisdom takes root. Eventually, this fun-sized animated bottle, once a baby with a Walmart mobile, a stuffed whale and bullied fist, reverts to its constituents: water, vapor, heat, solids, rain, and sewer beds. A landful of e-waste ready to be recycled, and gulls circling storm clouds on wings of shit. A child turns to its mother. Of course, naturally, a child without a mother is no child at all. A child-sized casket exists because the child once lived. No child, no container, no fetus, no growing womb. In Heart-Shaped Box, a song about vaginas, Cobain sings of the umbilical noose, of climbing right back. Stripped of metaphor, wombs are wet, blood is warm, bones are white, and the baby's breath is sweet. Baby's breath, the thing the nose smells. So the nose itself is baby's breath, and still not quite a nose, just intimately fitted through contact and feeling, like a mobile getting tangled in its self-created current, like a lid snapped shut on a heart-shaped coffin. Imagine blaming the baby's breath on the nose. Imagine tweeting about it, getting 5,000 retweets, then killing yourself over a flood of hate drowns your DMs. As such, the normies live, setting up standards like their front and back sneaks never meet. Do not waste your time. I'm begging you, like the men who exhort me daily to put aside childish things, to make my bed and clean my room. But one more podcast clip or press junket, one more anti-vaxxer thread on school, one PNG swipe right, another block in my Minecraft memory, my Discord confession to zero context, endless twilight. But inside those blocks, a great mind, even blocks we build ourselves. Even the vilest tongue on Twitch confesses mystery. Even Logan and Jake Paul refract a darkness that makes the world one. Do not waste your time chasing tendrils or suburbs. Do not ignore the roots beneath the trees. Don't get trapped like a critic in the walls, guessing far and wide, calling it objective, making mountains sprout and rivers roar, doomed to be a loser for this life that means. Yeah, I'll do one more and then, all right. This is kind of like where the title came from, for A Horse at the Window. It's another very reverent excavation. To a preface piece, something called the Mumonkan. It is called the Gateless Gate. And now they say it will be quick. They say it will be like catching a glimpse of a white horse galloping by your area. Just as silly, just as bright. Or like catching a shooting star above you in cold space. Star or a satellite, or the International Space Station, or a twinkling rhomboid of rock while you crane your neck to look. It will be your mother's silhouette, not 1 week dead, in the kitchen archway at 2:24 a.m., right before you throw on the oven, go back to blubbering into sorghum. Someone's lucky hand in poker flashed in drunken jest, and then the blurry after image. Few numbers, reds and blacks, the face of a queen or a jack. They say it will be like all these things. It will be the tip of the tongue, the top of the mind, a deja vu, a quick goodbye. Like a man hurtling past your office window from 30 floors up, a billow of cream-colored coat, legs bent like in the tarot, and a blue September sky installed behind you. Before, you didn't notice a door. Up in the attic of nails, drywall, studs, and sour wallpaper, there were merely 4 walls, hobbling a room you'd come to know as yourself. Then it opened, and you remembered the dream from last night. You saw the fish surfacing and swallowing the silver fly. You saw the sun dark and dip to earth, as if to kiss or drink. Before, you didn't even know there was a door. So when it closes again, just as quickly, it crushes your heart. I was born a green ape. My destiny, my job is to become a scarlet oak. Born a wispy seed, I'll push through sticky, clumpy earth to unfurl my leaves. I was born a black mote to burst forth a tadpole. I'll grow muscular legs, become a frog, and sit very still, sucking flies in a murky bog in the young end. Born a golden retriever, I'll run and bark and sleep in the sun until my eyebrows go limp. Born a horse, I'll fall from my mother, but soon begin to trot. Born a man, my tongue turns to iron, my bones to dust. Unpacking boxes, opening cuts, rehearsing injuries in a dry, dusty attic, I spot the seam and grooves and hinges of a door. I see the door open for the length of time it takes something bright to race past my room. Was that a white horse? Was it something as impossible as magical? What is the one thing that nothing, no one, not one thing has or can hold for me? With the baby rotting, I cheat for my destiny. Sweating, finding sleep, waking up, nodding up, rousing myself, slapping my cheeks, pacing, flopping down, drinking water, falling asleep again, unable to lift my chin, the radio static, the distorted waltz from the news where only heavy lead, vinyl pop, falling asleep again. Hilarious what the day devours. Hilarious to know halfway through that a year is something that eats. Finding a lack of choice in birth and subsistence. Letting things happen. Letting the chips fall where they may. All with a hilarious smile on their face. Months devour weeks. Years show themselves insatiable for the small, infinitely divisible things they contain. What's another nap in the morning? A slow clomp up the stairs to bed in the afternoon. What's another walk to the drugstore? What's another day spent hunting a password in an Excel file saved in a shared drive? A series of minute ethical decisions like, did you think that for the red smear of the Did you respond with joy to your enemy's ascension? At the very end of the world, the last night on earth, we go to bed. I mean to squeeze your hand upon me. I need to stay up to work. But look at us, we've fallen asleep. Instead of holding or whispering through the crickets and sirens of this last summer night, we turn away, soon uncomfortable from the heat. And you sleep on your back, and I sleep on my leg, the way I did as a child, cheek against a clear pillow. There's a 25-year-old episode of The Simpsons flashing pink and blue and yellow over our dreaming heads, beamed from the light of a laptop lamp. At one point in the night, still asleep, sit up, point toward the wall where, for a moment, there is a door. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. We love an early access. Everybody pick up. Also, I realized Desperados in California, which is like actually the one.
Oh, no. It's not mine, but
So we're gonna start Q&A. Just say the questions as they come to you, except online. Please type in the questions anytime that you think of them, so that we can get to them in turn. And please note that we will only read questions that are respectful of our readers. And do not promote any kind of oppression.
question time.
Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, so, yeah, this is
The oratory will come around. I will give this.
yeah, you get back to them. I'm gonna run with this. Even if you think you have a loud voice, we prefer to use this for accessibility reasons. I did just a little color commentary here. Poems. I went to theater school. I was gonna couldn't get an audition, walk into that, they wouldn't get art. But they were lovely. And that first one is like so extremely online. I'm like, yeah, you know, those references. Yeah, exactly. I'm a parent of a child who's 12. I know, yeah, I know all too many of those things. Okay, so questions. Okay, I'll start. So that's all funny, even though some were really depressing, right? Like I thought there was humor in all of them. So that's what struck me is that like even the ones that are like, oh, I'm suicidal was less. And so, I wondered if each of you would talk about the part that humor plays in your practice. I guess I'm holding like.
It's like straight up.
It's all good. It's rude because I actually woke up this morning to the soothing sounds of Kathy Griffith. Talking about the role that humor plays in dealing with trauma. Because she's doing a world tour, I guess, partly comedy and partly talking about dealing with the world through comedy. And honestly, you know, if you can't laugh at the darkest things, what are you going to laugh at? You know, when my sister-in-law was dying of cancer, that's what we did. We laughed because it's ridiculous. Like the world is ridiculous, and to think anything else is to have lost your perspective. To go back to laughter is to regain your perspective. I think.
Good answer. Yeah, I think if you've written just for yourself or you've written for publication or anything in between, it's pretty like your motivation is always for me anyway, it's always on the table. Like why the hell am I doing this? So sometimes I like to make myself laugh, and there's a lot of joy out of that process. Just lolling alone. You know, I also think, you know, like humor in work is like you said, it's through even very dark things, but also it's how we kind of like connect to one another. Like if you share a sense of humor, there's something really fundamentally, there's like deep kinship. And when you don't, it just doesn't work. I mean, no matter how much you want to enjoy something, if it's supposed to be funny, but it's not like registering with you at that really intimate level. So there's something really magically about humor in a lot of ways, I feel, that reaches something really deep inside us that is like unmistakably human, unmistakably you, whoever you are.
Going off of what James has already said, yes, I do think there's something very magical about humor. Humor plays an important part in my life. I enjoy laughing, and as you said, yeah, sometimes I laugh at the most depressing things the most. I think when I was writing Desperata, I did not set out for the book to, I get different reactions from people who read it. Some people say it was really hilarious, and other people say it was like devastating. So I don't know, maybe different people get different parts of the book, but I think for me, I just intended to show the scenes as true to real life, or how I felt that they would happen in real life. So I wasn't trying to be depressing or funny, but sometimes it happens. And then when some parts were humorous, sometimes I did lean into it or lean back the other way. But I think, yeah, the happy, sad, I mean, life is never just one thing. So I think it's true to life to have both elements. In my life, at least.
Yeah, I find that humor is a great way to look at all sorts of things, the good, the bad, and in between. And I set out, when I started writing my book, I did want to have humor in it. Then I found that I almost used it self-consciously, because I didn't want to sound too literary. I was kind of, there was something self-conscious about it. And then the more I played around with the humor, I thought, I'm just going to go full on humor to address some serious issues here. I thought it was one way to talk about the residential schools. I talked a lot with Indigenous faculty and support staff and students during my work, and Indigenous people. You have the privilege of getting to know Indigenous folks and communities. Humor is such a huge part of the culture and how they look at the horrible tragedies that Indigenous people have had to endure. I also grew up in a big, loud, wild Irish Canadian family. Everybody was, everybody had a sense of humor. It's the only way to get through life. So I find that it's helpful. You can use it to hide a little bit too much. Irish are often accused of pushing their angst way down and then pouring some Guinness and some Irish whiskey on top of that, and there's probably a little bit in that. I'll just also touch on humor. Duffy, the character in the novel, has really bad anxieties, and he's on meds all the way through, and it's something running through there. And it mirrors my own experience. And I've always covered that up with humor and not wanting people to know that I'm dying. And so I think humor again is a way we deal with some things that we're uncomfortable with as well. So I try to use that as a superpower, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Love your yes.
I wanted to ask all of you, where do you feel like, I think you answered my question a little bit at the end of your statement there, just saying how you also reflected some of Duffy's anxieties and just like wanting to seem okay when you're maybe not. But at the same time, where would all of you say that you put yourself in your characters or in your books and seen a reflection of yourself in your books?
Did I pick that off? Or?
You got one?
A lot of people, because I worked at a university, a lot of people said, "Oh, I know who that character is, and I know what that incident was." And I intentionally use incidents and that could have happened at any university, and that I had never heard of at any other university. Similar with people, they're either fiction or they're composites. The one character that probably has the most of somebody in it is Duffy. Although Duffy's thin and good apparently, he looks like pretty scary. So not me. I enjoyed writing descriptions of Duffy because it wasn't me. He has a skinny bum He played in a Bruce Springsteen cover band. So I know three chords. That far, so that's not me. So I didn't put that in there. I felt that, in a sense, it was so easy to do because I was comfortable with that character, but it's not all me. And I think it's a really interesting discussion about how much of ourselves are in a character and how that character evolves and your understanding of it evolves the more you write and rewrite and rewrite. I'm not crazy about that sort of a mystical idea that the characters come alive and they start writing and talking, but in some senses they do. So I'd love to hear, to build on that great question, love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, this is a very good question. One thing I did not foresee or expect when I published my first book was like how many people would just automatically assume that it was autobiographical or the main character was just me, and that I had made up none of it. Obviously I drew from experiences that I've had, but I think really like each character or different characters all have parts of me in them. And I don't feel that the main character is a greater part of me than other characters. So yeah, I mean, I draw on myself and my own experiences, but also people that I've met, and feelings, that I've had or been given. The novel itself, I kind of conceived almost like as a go to my 20s. In terms of like all these different people that you, when you're in your 20s, these different experiences that you have that change you, or you change them. And so I definitely, every character is made up, but I drew from real feelings and experiences, in ways that I don't even think I probably understand fully.
I think like in most of the work I've done, it's been like I've avoided personal testimony or like autobiography, and like a lot of the way I've been able to get into a piece is through voice. So in this book that's out, it's like a bunch of voices speaking, and so they're all speaking from different perspectives, and they're not necessarily me. So sometimes it feels like Sophia, you're saying like there's a little bit of you, but it's like a shattered glass, little shards of it. But I've also felt that like the more personal something really gets, the more dangerously bad it gets. Like I can get like really too sentimental, and it's like that's like to fall off of being like, this is how I really feel, so I'm gonna pour it in here, and then it's like so like openly, baldly emotional that it's not aesthetic, and it's like it loses a kind of values there. So I think like I'm trying more. I remember like, I don't know, I took this one way, and my friend Liz was like talking about stuff, and she's like, especially you need to be full off when you're ready. And so I took that to mean be more emotional and go to the darker place if I need to, and stop treating it as such a remove. And that's been a real challenge, and scary.
So most of the poems in Crazy Mad are definitely with my own perspective, if not actually in my own voice. But most of them actually are. And that felt really dangerous to me, because coming into poetry 20 to 30 years ago, what I was told at the time was that there was just no taste for that sort of poetry, about the self, about your own perspective, that had gone out of style with Sylvia Plath, and thank heavens, because we don't need any more poetry about housewives. So that was something to get over. And so coming back to that and trusting my own voice, trusting that my perspective of the world is something that I at least value enough to put into words, and that's a valuable exercise, has been a process for me. And to see that it then resonates
because human experience should resonate. But I think it resonates best when it comes from your own core, from your own experience in life. So the very thing that I think was being pushed against for decades in Canada at least, in poetry at least, I think is some of the most interesting work that's happening out there right now.
I appreciate that.
Other questions? Yeah.
Please, somebody else.
Well, I just want to mention that AJ also has a book of short stories back here. That there definitely is some humor, some fantastical things. So like, there's multiple offerings.
So I think the last thing I was thinking about while you all were talking was, I really loved all your perspectives and thank you for that. Within that statement of you just being able to trust yourself on that journey to trusting yourself, I think it's a two-part story, two-part question, kind of, but answer however you feel comfortable. One, did all of you go to some sort of school or art school to feel confident in what you're doing, especially me as a very amateur poet? I tried to feel confident, but I didn't do anything in high school besides one a presentation to be more confident, and after that I really didn't do much besides write on my own. So did you all do programs or anything, or go to some type of class or school to feel more confident? That's yeah. Okay, so I'll start. So yes, I went to the University of Victoria's creative writing program. No, that did not make me feel in any way more confident. That's it. What did make me feel more confident was the practice of writing, the practice of reading vast amounts, and above all, the practice of workshopping with other authors and getting other people's perspectives on my own writing. So, other people who were not necessarily professors. No offense, professors.
Let's have better professors.
Yeah, same. I did a creative writing MA. You did too, yeah, like we did the same MA. Yeah, I don't like, well, it'll be interesting to know. We could talk about that a lot because we have such similar experience, but like, yeah, like I was like at the time, I was also like publishing a magazine on like, and doing micropress stuff and going to readings a lot. And back then, Toronto had a lot more readings going on like over 10 plus 15 years ago. Which is a different vibe. You could see spoken word, you could see a poetry chapbook launch. You could go to like the bookstore for more like, I don't know, prestigious literary press doing a novel. There's like the same, like just so much. And so that it was the validation of having your peers and just doing it and being like, well, the traditional route to publication, I'm supposed to be doing this through this institution and through these steps in this process. So I think I'm going to try that. Like I wanted to do a PhD. This is why I did this. And I didn't do a PhD, stopped going to school. And then it's like, yeah, I just felt better and more validated and felt a route through doing with peers and with like other people who did not have that kind of like right at the time. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, you know, with books maybe, or with a community. And that's almost better because a book is ephemeral, it goes away. It's just a thing, it dies. Usually they get pulped or they get burnt if there's no press eventually. The publisher will be like, we can't hold these anymore. So goodbye. But if you build a community, these are friendships and like relationships you carry with you for the rest of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Spencer's saying, the program, for me, the best thing that came out of doing a writing program was the people I met in the community. It was not I feel like I didn't really learn how to be a better writer, but I kind of, yeah, it was all through my peers, going to reading series, and people doing readings, creating like our own little workshopping groups to kind of be held accountable and actually produce on a regular basis, was infinitely more useful than coursework.
For me, I guess, maybe for you too, yeah.
No, my answer is no, I didn't go to, school to study creative writing. I have to say though, I just feel really fortunate, since I was like 5 or 6, I wanted to be a writer sometime. And I just never lost that focus. And I went into journalism because I knew I had to pay the bills. I wanted to, I came out of university and I did a lot of jobs over the years, but I didn't go, partly because I was writing every day as a journalist, writing and getting feedback, lots of feedback, like this is a piece of shit, go back. And you write this. A newsroom is sort of the school of hard knocks that way. If you're fortunate to work for good editors, they, go back. And when you finally get it right, you get it right, and yeah, not bad. But I have to say, the advice I give to folks is to, if you want to be a writer, at some point you have to write and you have to read. Reading makes for great writing, I think. And you also have to sit your bum in a chair. And I was just giving some coaching to my nephew who loves writing about fantasy, and he's like 32 and he's got a little baby at home. And he said, I don't have time to write, but he's a good writer. And I just said, sit down and write 250 words, 500 words a day, or maybe 3 days a week, and give yourself freedom to have a half an hour or an hour, because nothing beats practice. I mean, just write and write and write. And much of what you write will be crap. I mean, it will. But that's the journey towards something that's less crap. It really, and I've coached a lot of young journalists on creative storytelling as well, and writing features and so on. And if you have the desire, reading critically as well. So if you're reading a story, if you're reading Desperata and there's a line in there, and you say, how did Sophia do that? How did you feel a certain way? Go back and reread that line and reread that paragraph and look at the mechanics, the craft behind the poetry, behind what in your case, the fiction. And you can't beat that. And I don't think you can become a great writer, a good writer, a confident writer, until you actually start to read critically. And why did that piece make me laugh or make me feel something? And go back, because there's a craft behind it, right? There's art, but there's also nails and duct tape and craft and a way of creating a joint and all that kind of thing. I don't want to make it sound too workmanlike, but most art is really good craftsmanship, I think, and that just comes with doing it and doing it and doing it.
You and it win. Sorry, my brain's. Just want to pick up what they're saying about how, like, maybe the MFA is not what you need. Maybe it's writing community. A great way of building community. Volunteering with a living community. It is. You get to meet all the writers. You get to meet so many people when you volunteer with a literary series. And we're losing our beautiful, wonderful Jen, Ottawa. Last year we lost our beautiful, wonderful Emily, who went to the Atlantic Canada. So we need to replace, but they don't all need to be tall blondes. We lost 2 tall blondes. We don't need to replace a tall blonde. But we do need people who love literature. Doesn't have to be poetry, doesn't have to be, you can be like, I only read dystopian sci-fi. That's on my mind. But like, this gives them access, copyright, it's on my mind. You can only do one thing, we still want you. So like, please reach out, we need volunteers. That was me really taking advantage of that. More questions? Anything from online? Okay. Okay, do we have time for our usual open tender? It's 8:30 right now. 8:26. We have time, okay. So, our usual ender, our Brockton classic ender is recommend one book that you have read recently that you think everybody should read. Oh, no, he was just the one being like, read.
Busted. I've been reading a lot of things, and I'm just trying to think of something that's, well, okay. I read this book called The Art of Storytelling, or The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. Anybody read that? It's about the psychology of how evocative writing works. And so it talks about how, or why certain precepts like, write with with the active voice, say, things that are kind of tried and true that help you write well. So, and why does that work? And so he has tons of examples from great pieces of literature, but also from screenplays about here's what's happening. And I guess it gets back to that point. I love trying to understand the mechanics and the craftsmanship going on behind beautiful writing. And how does it work? And there is some art in there. There is some mystery, but there's a lot of craftsmanship. So I read this book by Will Storr, S-T-O-R-R. He's a British, well, he was a journalist, but now he teaches at university. And it's called The Science of Storytelling.
Okay, I have there's so many. I will pick, I'm gonna choose and do two. Okay, I won't do it. I won't do it. Okay, I'll just pick one. Okay, so A Manual for Clean Women by Lucia Berlin. I have read that. It's one of the few books that I always have on my bookshelf. I read continuously. And then they published recently a book of Lucille Clifton poems, How to Carry Water, which is really beautiful too.
I will recommend, from Katrina Wright's book of poetry, it's called Continuity of Words, and it's just been nominated for the Chile Award, so that was great for her, so I'll recommend.
One of the great things about being in writing community is that friends will recommend your work. So I'm going to recommend another friend's work, Natalie Hannes from Ottawa, We Found Our Food. A beautiful collection of poetry, some very traumatic stuff, but very powerful.
Oh, you kept that super short. That's amazing. I just want to, you said a Trillium winner. Were you the one nominated? Okay. Were you the one that had the line about the like a guilty confession that I would like Taylor?
Yeah, whoever was speaking that thing.
Not you, not you. Not you. Okay, that made me laugh. That made me laugh because it was so guilty. Like, oh man, I like the Taylor winner. I like that. I feel that. Thank you, everybody. Let's give over. Now I'm just gonna give a quick update if I can log into my phone. So what I was gonna say next is like, I don't know if I'm in or not, is about like hitting the volunteer thing, but I already took like a big advantage of that. But like, please, let me know if you want to volunteer. You don't have to be up here if you're like a shy person. You don't have to be up here. There's other things you can do. Let's reach out. And there's still books for sale at the back. Please hang around, go buy a book, go buy a book. These wonderful people, they have books. There's also books by not them on the shelves, but you should buy books by them, for they are here and they are who we are featuring tonight. Our next record is July 10th, 2024. Back here at Glad Day, although still on YouTube, even though you know that has dystopian aspects. But so does all of our lives right now here in 2024. And then every aspect leads to a dystopia. So we're fine, it's good. We'll be hearing from Mary Reichov, Alex Taffarelli, D.S. Steinmeist, and Vincent Agnoki. And as always, we'll bring in an industry professional to teach us something about the craft or art or business of writing. Thank you, everybody, and good night.